Ever wonder what happens if you stop tipping? I'm an ordinary guy who eats out maybe 3 times a week. For years, I tipped a standard 20% without thinking. That was my defining trait, the automatic tipper. Last Tuesday, I was at my regular breakfast spot. The bill came to $18 for eggs and coffee. The tablet suggested tips, 20%, 25%, 30%. I hit 20% like always, but then I stopped. The server hadn't refilled my coffee once. She took more than 10 minutes to finally come for my order and drop the plate without a word. I started paying more attention after that. The next week, I went to 5 different restaurants and kept notes. At the burger place, the cashier handed me a bag and spun the tablet around. The tip was pre-selected at 20% for a pickup order where I drove to them. At the sandwich shop, I watched the owner ring me up and ask for a tip on his own food. At the coffee shop, the tablet asked for a tip before anyone had even made my drink. The more I looked, the worse it got. One tablet asked for 35% as the middle option. I did the math on my bank statements. Last year, I spent $2,400 on tips. Not on the food, just the tips. That's a decent vacation or 3 months of my car payment. My wife, Sarah, was pregnant, so I really needed to start saving money anyway. Thursday morning, I stopped at my regular coffee shop before work. The barista, Mike, knew my order. He made my coffee without the usual small talk. When the tablet came around, I hit no tip like I'd been doing. He saw it. Really? Mike said. I'm just not tipping right now, I replied. You've been coming here for 2 years, he said, his voice getting louder. I know your order before you say it. I remember when you got engaged. I asked about your wife last week. I make $15 an hour. You know what that is after taxes and rent. I depend on these tips. We all do. You make minimum wage plus tips, I said quietly. In other states, servers make $2 an hour. He cut me off. You think that's a living wage? You think I can survive on that? The line behind me was growing. Everyone was staring. I pulled out my wallet and put $2 in the jar. He took it without saying anything. I grabbed my coffee and left. I called my wife and told her I needed to stop this experiment. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, you saved us $120 so far this month. That's $120 toward diapers for our daughter. I know it's hard, but we need this. She was right. I knew she was right. But the thought of another confrontation made me sick. That Saturday, I took Sarah out for dinner. The restaurant was one we'd been saving for. We ordered carefully, watching our budget. The server, Lisa, took forever to greet us, 20 minutes. Then she mixed up our orders, bringing Sarah a dish with shellfish after she specifically mentioned being pregnant and avoiding it. Sarah pushed the plate away, worried. Lisa shrugged and said she'd fix it. Another 30 minutes passed. No food, no server. I finally flagged down a manager. He apologized, comped one entree, and rushed out the correct order. But Sarah barely touched her food. The night was ruined. The bill came to $60 after the comp. The tip suggestions were at the bottom of the bill. I wrote no tip. Lisa came back to grab the bill. She turned to walk away, but opened it to see her tip. She spun back around toward me. Are you serious right now? The service wasn't good, I said quietly. You got the order wrong. My wife's pregnant, and you brought her shellfish. She wasn't just annoyed. She was furious. I've been on my feet for 9 hours. I have tables backed up because we're understaffed, and you're going to stiff me? The manager came over and asked if everything any okay. This customer refused to tip me, Lisa said, after I've been busting my ass all night. The manager looked tired. Sir, was there a problem with the service? I explained everything. The manager nodded. I understand. I already comped an entree for that, but you understand our servers depend on tips to survive. She makes minimum wage. Plus tips, I said. Lisa's voice cracked. You think that's enough? I'm a single mom. I have 2 kids. Do you know what rent costs? What daycare costs? I explained that my wife is 7 months pregnant. We are $8,000 in debt, and we have hospital bills coming. I would have tipped for good service, but the service was bad. Lisa wiped her eyes. So you're broke, and you came to a sit-down restaurant? Maybe you should have stayed home. We're leaving, Sarah said, standing up. We paid. We're leaving. We drove home, and all I could think was, the server was right. The silence in the car was heavy. The kind of silence that happens when you both know you've crossed a line you can't uncross. Sarah stared out the passenger window at the passing streetlights. I kept my hands at 10 and 2, squeezing the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Did I go too far? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Sarah didn't look at me. I don't know, Mark. It felt ugly. It felt really ugly in there. She brought you shrimp, Sarah. You could have gotten sick. The baby could have... I know, she snapped, finally turning to face me. The service was terrible, but hearing her say she's a single mom, hearing the manager back her up even when he knew she messed up, it just makes me feel like we're the villains in someone else's story. I pulled the car into our driveway and shut off the engine. The dashboard lights flickered out, leaving us in the dark. My mind was racing, calculating. If I had tipped at 20%, it would have been $12. $12. In the grand scheme of an $8,000 debt, it was nothing, but it was the principle. Or was it? The next few days were a blur of internal tallying. I started cooking at home more, which helped the budget, but every time I passed a service counter, I felt a physical pang of anxiety. I went to the grocery store, and even there, at the self-checkout, a prompt popped up. Would you like to donate $1, $3, or $5 to hungry families? I stared at the screen. I was trying to save money so my family wouldn't be hungry, or at least so we could afford the prenatal vitamins and the high-yield crib Sarah wanted. I hit no, and for the first time, I felt a hot flash of shame. Not because I didn't care about hungry families, but because I was starting to see no as my default setting. On Wednesday, I had a lunch meeting with a client at a bistro downtown. I couldn't avoid it. I tried to be the perfect customer. Low maintenance, polite, quick. When the bill came, the client paid for the food, but he looked at me and said, grab the tip. It was a $90 lunch. 20% was $18. My hand shook as I reached for my wallet. I looked at the server, a young guy who looked like he was working through a flu. He'd been decent. Not amazing, but decent. I pulled out a 20 and handed it to him. Keep it, I said. He smiled, a genuine relieved smile. Thanks, man. Seriously, it's been a slow shift. As I walked back to the office, I felt a strange sense of relief, followed immediately by frustration. I was back where I started. I was paying for the privilege of not feeling like a jerk. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with our spreadsheet open. Sarah was on the couch, rubbing her stomach. The nursery was half painted. We needed a new rug because the old one had a permanent coffee stain I'd never managed to get out. I tipped today, I admitted. Sarah looked up from her book. How much? $18. Well, 20. She sighed and leaned her head back. Mark, we talked about this. We're over budget on the nursery already. The car is making that clicking sound again. We can't afford to be the big big spenders anymore. I'm not trying to be a big spender. I raised my voice, then immediately regretted it. I'm just trying to exist without people screaming at me in public. I'm trying to be able to look a barista in the eye. So what's the plan? She asked, her voice dangerously calm. Do we tip when we feel guilty? Do we tip only when they're nice? Or do we just stop going out entirely? Maybe we should stop going out, I said, but we didn't. 2 nights later, we were exhausted. Sarah had been on her feet all day at work, and I pulled a double. The fridge was empty. We decided to hit the local diner, the one place we figured was safe. It was a greasy spoon, the kind of place where the menus are laminated and sticky. The server was an older woman named Martha. She had a name tag with little cat stickers on. She was efficient, kind, and brought Sarah an extra pillow for her back without being asked. It was the best service we'd had in months. When the bill came, it was $34. I looked at the total. I looked at Martha, who was joking with a regular at the counter. I looked at Sarah. She deserves it, Sarah whispered. This time, she really deserves it. I took out my pen. I calculated 20%, $6.80. Then I thought about the $120 we'd saved. I thought about the single mom at the other restaurant. I thought about Mike at the coffee shop. And I wrote in $15 for the tip, nearly 50%. As we walked out, I felt nothing. No rush of pride, no sting of loss, just a profound sense of exhaustion. The system was broken. If I didn't tip, I was a monster taking food out of a worker's mouth. If I did tip, I was a sucker, draining my own family's future to subsidize a business owner who wouldn't pay a living wage. I realized then that it wasn't about the money. Not really. It was about the fact that every single interaction in my life had become a moral transaction. A coffee wasn't just a coffee, it was a test of my character. A dinner wasn't just a meal, it was a performance review where I held someone's rent in my hands. A week later, I went back to Mike's coffee shop. I hadn't been there since the blow-up. The air was thick with the smell of burnt beans and steam. When I got to the front of the line, Mike looked at me. He didn't smile. Large black coffee, I said. He poured it, put the lid on, and set it on the counter. Then he turned the tablet around. The options stared back at me. 20%, 25%, 30%, no tip. My finger hovered over the screen. I thought about the diapers. I thought about the car's clicking sound. I thought about the $2,400 I'd spent last year. And then I thought about Mike, who lived in a city where a studio apartment cost $1,800 a month. I hit 20%. Mike took the tablet back. He didn't say thank you. He just moved on to the next customer. I walked out into the cold morning air, clutching my $5 cup of coffee. I had spent $6 for a drink that cost the store maybe 30 cents to make. I had participated in the system. I was a good guy again. But as I took a sip, the coffee tasted bitter. It wasn't the beans. It was the realization that I wasn't tipping because I was generous. I was tipping because I was tired of fighting a war I couldn't win. I was paying for the silence. I was paying for the right to be ignored. I got into my car and checked my bank app. The balance was lower than it should have been. I looked at the ultrasound photo tucked into the sun visor. I'm sorry, kid, I muttered to the empty car. Your dad's just trying to figure out how to be a person. I put the car in gear and drove to work, wondering how many more no-tip buttons I had left in me, and knowing with a sinking feeling that the answer was probably 0. The weeks following the diner incident felt like a slow-motion collision between my conscience and my bank account. Sarah was now 32 weeks along, and the nursery, once a symbol of excitement, had become a room of unfinished projects and mounting costs. Every time I looked at the gallon of soft sand paint sitting on the drop cloth, I saw the $45 it cost, plus the tax, plus the $5 I felt pressured to tip the guy who mixed it at the hardware store because he'd gone the extra mile to find the right lid. It was everywhere. It was a plague of expectations. On Tuesday, the clicking in the car finally turned into a grind. I took it to a local mechanic, a guy named Sal, who had grease permanently etched into the lines of his palms. He spent 20 minutes under the hood, wiped his hands on a rag, and told me it was the CV axle. $600 all in, Sal said. I felt the air leave my lungs. 600? Parts are expensive, kid. Labor is what it is. I paid him with a credit card, the debt creeping toward the $9,000 mark. When he handed me the electronic clipboard to sign, my heart skipped a beat. There it was, the white screen, the percentages, 10%, 15%, 20%. I stared at Sal. He was a business owner. He set his own rates. He had just charged me $250 for 2 hours of labor, and now the machine was asking me to give him another $60 to $120 just for doing the job we'd agreed upon. Is this for you? I asked, pointing at the screen. Sal looked at the floor, then back at me. The system just comes with that software, man. But hey, it helps with the overhead. Shop supplies, electricity, that kind of thing. I hit no tip. My hand didn't shake this time. It felt cold. Sal took the clipboard back, his expression flattening into something unreadable. Man, he didn't say, have a nice day. He just turned and walked back into the garage, the heavy sliding door clanging shut behind him. I sat in the car for 10 minutes before starting the engine. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life, drifting from one awkward encounter to the next. I called Sarah. The car is fixed, I said. $600. Oh God, she whispered. Mark, we're drowning. I looked at the hospital's pre-admission forms today. Even with our insurance, the out-of-pocket for the delivery is going to be $3,000 minimum. I know, I said. I'm working on it. I'm picking up extra shifts at the office. Maybe we should sell some things, she suggested. The old mountain bikes, the guest bed. We'll figure it out, Sarah. Just stop looking at the numbers for tonight. I'll pick up some groceries on the way home. We're eating in. I went to the supermarket, the one with a value sign hanging crookedly over the entrance. I walked the aisles like a soldier in a minefield, comparing the price per ounce of generic oats versus the name brand. I was down to counting pennies. I had $40 in my pocket to last until Friday. As I approached the checkout, I saw a woman ahead of me. She was older, wearing a faded uniform from the local dry cleaners. She had a small basket, bread, milk, a single bunch of bananas, and a small bouquet of grocery store carnations. The cashier, a teenager with dyed blue hair and a tired slouch, rang her up. That'll be $22.14. The woman swiped her card. It declined. She tried again. Declined. She looked down at her shoes, her face flushing a deep, painful red. I'm sorry, she whispered. I thought I must have miscalculated. She started to reach for the flowers to put them back. I've got it, I said, stepping forward. I pulled out my remaining $40 and handed 2 20s to the cashier. The woman looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears. Oh no, sir, I can't. again. It's my daughter's birthday. She's not doing well. I wanted her to have something bright. It's okay, I said. And for the first time in weeks, I meant it. Please, take them. She thanked me a dozen times, clutching the flowers like they were made of gold. After she left, the cashier handed me my change. Then he flipped a little swivel screen toward me. Would you like to tip the cashier? I looked at the screen. I looked at the kid. Was I had just given away $20 I couldn't afford to a woman who truly needed it? I had felt a spark of genuine human connection, a moment of real charity that didn't feel like a tax or a shakedown. And now, this machine was trying to monetize that feeling. It was trying to guilt me into paying the store's wages for them. No, I said firmly. The kid shrugged. Whatever. I drove home in total silence. No radio, no podcasts. When I got inside, Sarah was sitting on the floor of the nursery, a half-assembled crib surround her. She looked exhausted. I bought the groceries, I said, setting the bags on the counter. And I gave $20 to a woman at the store. Her card declined. Sarah looked up, her eyes wide. Mark, we have $20 to our name until Friday. Why would you do that? Because it was real. It's Sarah, I shouted, my voice cracking. It wasn't a tablet being shoved in my face. It wasn't a suggested percentage for someone who didn't even talk to me. She was a person. She was hurting, and I helped her because I wanted to, not because I was afraid of what she'd think of me if I didn't. Sarah stood up slowly, bracing herself against the wall. I get it, I do. But we are about to have a baby, and you're out here playing Robin Hood while we're one car repair away from losing everything. You're so obsessed with this tipping war that you've lost sight of us. I'm not obsessed, I whispered, though I knew it was a lie. I'm just tired of being the bad guy. You're not the bad guy to the world, Mark, she said, walking over and putting her hand on my chest. But if we don't have enough for the hospital, you're going to feel like a bad guy to me. And to her. She pointed to her belly. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the $2,400. I thought about the single mom Lisa, and Mike the barista, and Sal the mechanic, and the woman with the flowers. The world was leaning on all of us. The business owners were leaning on the servers were leaning on the customers, and the customers were leaning on their own crumbling futures. We were all just trying to keep our heads above water, and we were drowning each other in the process. I realized then that my experiment was over. Not because I'd won, and not because I'd lost. I stopped because there was no right answer. If I tipped, I was broke. If I didn't, I was cruel. The only way to win was to stop playing the game entirely. And the next morning, I made coffee at home. It tasted like cardboard, but it was free. I packed a peanut butter sandwich for lunch. I didn't go to the bistro. I didn't go to the burger joint. On my way to work, I saw a new sign in the window of a local cafe. We are a tip-free establishment. We pay our staff a living wage. Our prices reflect the true cost of service. I pulled the car over. I walked inside. The menu was expensive. A coffee was $7, but there was no tablet, no percentages. The woman behind the counter smiled at me, a real relaxed smile, because her rent didn't depend on whether I liked her hair or how fast I wanted my drink. I paid the $7. I sat down, and for the first time in months, I just enjoyed my coffee. The nursery was finally finished, smelling of soft sand paint and a cheap rug that didn't quite lay flat. Sarah was 39 weeks along, her ankles swollen to the size of grapefruit, and our bank account was a desert. We had exactly $412 in our checking account, and the $9,000 credit card debt felt like a physical weight on my chest every time I took a breath. The experiment had turned into a lifestyle of avoidance. We didn't go out. We didn't order in. We were a fortress of frugality. But the world has a way of finding you. At 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, Sarah gripped my arm so hard her nails drew blood. Mark, it's time. The drive to the hospital was a blur of adrenaline and anxiety. I hit every green light, my hands trembling on the wheel. We checked in, and the machinery of modern medicine took over. Nurses, residents, the anesthesiologists. A parade of people in scrubs moving with practiced efficiency. Sarah was in labor for 14 hours. It was grueling. I watched her face contort in pain, watched the monitors beat with the rhythm of our daughter's heart, and felt a level of helplessness I'd never known. Through it all, there was one nurse, Elena. She was a veteran, the kind of woman who spoke in a calm, low hum that settled the room. She stayed 3 hours past her shift ended because she knew Sarah was close. She held Sarah's hand when I was too panicked to move. She anticipated every need before we even knew we had it. At 5:14 p.m., Maya was born. She was tiny, loud, and perfect. The world outside, the debt, the tablets, the awkward coffee shop confrontations, simply ceased to exist. For a few hours, there was only the three of us in a sterile room that felt like the center of the universe. The next morning, the real world came knocking in the form of a discharge coordinator. She was a brisk woman with a tablet tucked under her arm. She went over the paperwork, the insurance adjustments, and the final estimated balance we'd be billed for. And here, she said, flipping the tablet around as she handed me a stylus. This is for the Care Excellence Fund. It's a voluntary contribution that goes directly to the nursing staff and support team who handled your delivery. It's a way to show appreciation for the specialized care. I stared at the screen. The options were pre-set. $50, $100, $250, or custom. My stomach turned. This was the final boss. I looked at Sarah, who was cradling Maya, her face glowing with a tired and fragile peace. I thought about Elena. She had been an angel. She had literally guided my daughter into the world. If anyone in my entire life deserved a tip, it was her. But the Care Excellence Fund? I knew how these things worked. The hospital was a billion-dollar corporation. They charged $15 for a single Tylenol. They charged $200 for skin-to-skin contact time. And now they were asking me, a man who was already $9,000 in the hole, to subsidize the bonuses of their staff so they didn't have to raise wages. Does this go directly to Elena? I asked. The coordinator blinked. It goes into a pool, sir. It's distributed among the department based on seniority and performance metrics. Performance metrics, I repeated. The words felt like ash in my mouth. I looked at the custom button, and I thought about the $412 in my bank account. I thought about the diapers we still needed to buy on the way home. If I gave $100, I was choosing a faceless corporate fund over my own daughter's immediate needs. If I gave nothing, I was stoking that old, familiar fire of shame. I looked at Elena, who had just popped her head in to say goodbye. She wasn't looking at the tablet. She wasn't waiting for a percentage. She walked over, kissed Sarah Sarah on the forehead and gave Maya's tiny foot a squeeze. "You're going to be a great mom, Sarah," Elena whispered. "And Mark, take care of them." She turned and left. She didn't need my $50 metric bonus. She had done her job with a dignity that a tablet couldn't capture and a suggested tip couldn't quantify. I took the stylus, and I hit no contribution. The coordinator's smile didn't fade. It just became professional. "I understand. Please sign at the bottom." We walked out of the hospital an hour later. I carried Maya in her car seat, moving as if I were carrying a crate of nitroglycerin. The air was crisp, the sun was bright, and for the first time in a year, the weight on my chest felt manageable. As I strapped Maya into the back of the car with the new CV axle that I hadn't tipped for, I looked at Sarah. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "I'm done, Sarah. No more experiments. No more guilt. I'm just going to pay what things cost. If I want to be generous, I'll do it like I did with the woman at the grocery store, face to face, when it actually matters. But I'm done being bullied by software." Sarah smiled and reached for my hand. "Good. Hi, because we have a lot of work to do." I started the engine. The click was gone. The road ahead was long and the debt was still there. But as I pulled out of the parking lot, I didn't look at the tip jar in the lobby. I looked in the rearview mirror at my daughter. I was an ordinary guy. I was a father. And I was finally done paying for the right to feel like one.